So as you can see from the board, we will be continuing our study of biblical apologetics, and we're going to be continuing that with looking at some areas of science that we now are able to reveal truths that are given to us in the scriptures. Tonight we're going to be looking specifically at meteorological evidence. I started to write that on the board for the recording, and I got lazy and didn't follow through with that. It's quite a mouthful and a lot to write down as well. Meteorological evidence. This is of course referring to things that deal with our weather. The Bible actually has a lot to say about weather specifically, and some of that is useful for apologetics. And I want to try to pick out some of those things that are useful for us in that regard this evening. So if you haven't been here for this series, well, apologetics is sort of an unusual word to begin with. This is not something that we use in our everyday language outside of really this biblical context. And what this is all about is in regards to what we see in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15, where it says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense," and that Greek word there is apologia, "to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear." This apologia, where we get our word apologetics, this means having a ready defense and being able to defend our faith and defend our beliefs. When it comes to apologetics, you can, and we often do, sort of pick out a certain topic, and then we study that topic to prepare to defend ourselves with our beliefs on that topic. We talk about topics like baptism, why we immerse for the remission of our sins, why we have one cup and one loaf during the communion service, which we do every first day of the week, and the list goes on. All of these things that we hold true to our beliefs, that this is what the scriptures reveal to us. So we study and we prepare a defense of our beliefs in these areas. Now, this series that I'm going through, it's a little bit more broad. Really, what I'm hoping to do is to help us prepare a defense for our faith as a whole. Why we believe the Bible has divine authorship, and why we can trust that what the Bible says is true and accurate, and we can put our faith in it, and and help to prepare us to be able to defend it as well. So that's the intention for this study. It's more of a broad apologetic study of the Bible and really God as well. So when we consider this in the realm of meteorology, the way that we can use the scriptures to the things that are revealed in the scriptures to defend the scriptures is by looking at things that were recorded and were written that the authors could not have known or understood what they were writing about. And then now that we have technology that allows us to prove what was written, that gives us evidence for the divine authorship of the scriptures. So I'll get into the study, and hopefully that'll make a little bit more sense here. We're going to start off with what we call the water cycle. Now, during the time that the parts of the Old Testament were being written, this was around 2000 BC, so roughly 4,000 years ago, give or take a lot, sometimes thousands of years, but it's around this time period that the specific verses we're going to be looking at tonight are believed to have been written. Now, there are a lot of theories about meteorological events during that time period that people held. And some of these are completely outlandish, and some of them are somewhat close to the truth, but still miss the mark in one way or another. And what's really amazing, and I'm going to repeat it, I don't know how many times tonight and also throughout this study, but it's amazing how every single time the Bible mentions something, and the meteorological events included, it always comes out to be true. And so I'm sure I'm going to mention that several times. It just amazes me, and it instills in me such great faith to know to see these things that were written, and how every single time it always is true to science. So some of the things that people believed a long time ago in ancient times, during the times the Bible was being written, one was that the oceans would continue to rise because all of these rivers are draining into the oceans and into the seas. And really what was happening was a lack of understanding of the water cycle. And what we're talking about with the water cycle is evaporation and condensation, and then that raining coming down as rain in the form of precipitation back onto the earth, and it being this continuous cycle that God has set in motion on the earth, and it continues to happen. Well, people in ancient times did not understand this cycle. They of course can't witness many of these processes. Of course, they can see rain coming down and snow and the precipitation part of the cycle, but the other parts they weren't able to see and understand. They couldn't understand why a vessel of water or liquid would eventually disappear. And so this led to all sorts of theories of why that would happen. Of course, we now know that fundamentally as evaporation. It goes into the air and then eventually condenses in clouds and becomes rain. But they didn't understand this. There was really no way they could understand this. Plato, a very, of course, famous philosopher, theorized that there was a huge underground reservoir of water sort of at the center of the earth that was feeding and supplying every spring and every source of water on the earth, that there was this great mass of underground water, and that's what was allowing the continual source of river water. Then one of his students, Aristotle, went on to sort of develop that further, and he theorized that rivers are actually sourced from condensation that happens in caves. So of course, when you go into a cave, it's always very moist, and there's water that sort of collects on the walls and on the ceiling of the cave and drips down and forms little streams of water that flow into the rivers. And he theorized that this was how all the river water was happening. And what they were getting at, the root misunderstanding was that there wasn't enough rainwater to supply all of our rivers. And we now know that, of course, rivers are initially sourced with springs, and those springs are replenished by rainwater. And they didn't have the technology to know and understand how these things were sourced. So there was a lot of theories that were going around about how the water cycle happens and how this water is continually flowing along the rivers. When we look at what some of the things the scriptures have to say, we look at a passage like Job 36, verses 26 through 28, where here is recorded, "Behold, God is great, and we do not know him, nor can the number of his years be discovered. For he draws up drops of water, which distill as rain from the mist, which the clouds drop down and pour abundantly on man." Let's look at another. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 7. It says, "All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again." Now, this is such a profound statement when we take into light some of the other ancient theories about the sources of rivers and how and some of the beliefs that the oceans would be filling because they couldn't understand how water would eventually get back to the source of the rivers. We now know this at a fundamental level, but it's recorded there in Ecclesiastes thousands and thousands of years ago, exactly as it happens today. When you kind of put yourself in the place of the ancient writers and how sort of wild this statement would have been to make this, and it sort of highlights to me the reality of these writers not being influenced by the world around them. There were some of the theories we talked about a moment ago, but there were all sorts of theories that were made, and not a single time does one of those incorrect theories make its way into the scriptures. Every single incorrect theory is kept out, and every truth is recorded, and that highlights for us in the context of apologetics the truth that the Bible is divinely authored. Only the Creator at the time that these things were written would have revealed these things to these ancient writers. They could not have understood how rivers could return back to their source up so high where they started. So, of course, this suggests the closed loop system, which we now call the water cycle, and we teach this to our children at a young age. We all have a firm handle on this concept, and this was proven in around AD 1600 by a couple of French scientists, which I will not attempt to pronounce. But it took thousands of years for science to finally catch up to what the scriptures revealed thousands of years ago. And this is, of course, what we're talking about here with the water cycle that we teach and we understand and we know at a very fundamental level. Let's consider another as well. We see in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 again, if we back up one verse to verse 6, it says, "The wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit." Now, this is one that I will admit I didn't even actually understand what this was talking about myself until I went through this study. But this is talking about what we call the Coriolis effect. This is where warm air near the equator is heated up, and then that warm air rises and then makes a circuit up to the higher latitudes, and then there it is cooled down and then comes down and makes this sort of continual circuit. And with the rotation of the earth, it creates different patterns and designs that change throughout the seasons. And I've probably told you more about that than I actually know there, but it's something along those lines, and I tried to find a graphic to represent what's happening. The scriptures are far more intelligent than I am, but that's what we're talking about when we read Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 6. It's this continuous cycle of wind making this circuit across the earth. The initial discovery of these global wind circuits wasn't really fully proven and tested until beginning in around 1735. A scientist by the name of George Hadley made some of the initial theories that these events might be taking place, and they were studying the trade winds and how these patterns were consistent and trying to come up with some ideas of why this might be taking place. And it pointed back to what we see in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. And it took several hundred more years of technological advances to actually prove his theories about this. And we are now able to study this with the technology that we have today and the advances in meteorology. And this is a truth that we now can know and study. And science has again finally caught up to what the scriptures have been pointing out for thousands of years. And again, this is another case. There's absolutely no way that the author of the book of Ecclesiastes could have understood the circuits of the wind to that degree. We have another, up until around roughly the same time period, until the 17th century, with the invention of the barometer. This gave us the ability to understand another scientific misconception. We see in Job chapter 28, verse 25, it says, "To establish a weight for the wind and apportion the waters by measure." So this is talking about, of course, the weight of the air around us. We now know that the air actually has a weight, and the lower down you are toward the level of toward the sea and even beyond, there's more air above us, and that creates more pressure. which is what the barometer reveals to us. But before the invention of the barometer, there was no, the belief was that air had no weight. And that was what the leading scientists believed until we now are able to prove what the designer of these things told us many thousands of years ago. This verse explicitly states that the wind or air has weight, and we now are able to know and understand atmospheric pressures. Excuse me. The Bible also reveals another interesting aspect of meteorology, and these things are concerning rain and lightning. We'll read Psalm 135 and verse 7. It says, "He causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain. He brings the wind out of his treasuries." This is also repeated in Jeremiah chapter 10, essentially the same statement. So these statements are making several claims here that would be very difficult to understand, really impossible to truly understand when they were written. But we now are able to understand exactly what these verses are talking about. So there are two sort of phenomena that are being recorded or talked about here. One is the vapors ascending, was highlighted in yellow there. This is one of either two things. It's either the evaporation process, which we talked about just a few moments ago, and the other is the event whenever a storm is happening and there's a strong updraft that occurs in the storm, in the cells of the storm. And I lean more toward the second, given its sort of connection with lightning and rain there also in these statements. But either one would have been an incredible statement to have been made at the time they were written. Whether it was talking about evaporation, which they could not test and understand, or if they're talking about the updraft of a supercell, they couldn't really truly understand what was happening with that either. So either way, it's an incredible statement that is revealed to us in the scriptures. But again, I lean more toward the updraft consideration of the verse here. So the event that's taking place here is what we now call electrocoalescence, another mouthful word that really you don't need to know outside of the context of this study. But what's happening when lightning is formed in the clouds, it's formed due to a friction that occurs. When that updraft is happening, it forces the water molecules, and if there's ice up in the clouds, it causes those things to sort of collide, and it creates friction, and that's what causes the increase of the negative polarity up in the cloud. That water vapor is then attracted to water vapor of the opposite polarity, and when they combine enough times, then it creates a droplet of water that's heavy enough to fall from the cloud and create precipitation. That's electrocoalescence. That's how rain is formed in the clouds. It's because of the electrical disturbance that comes from the updraft. There are many leading theories at the time these things were written about lightning and thunder as well. These things being attributed to their false gods, and them being angry at the people, or something along those lines. And that is why the lightning and the thunder is happening. It was to frighten and intimidate and possibly punish the people for some wrongdoing. But we now understand that lightning is what gives the rain. It's what causes the life-giving rain to happen. Lightning really is a blessing because it provides the ability for the rain to occur. And this is the wording, the structure of this sentence really highlights the truth that's revealed to us, that the lightning is for the rain. Without the understanding without the technology that we now have to provide the understanding of how these events take place, there would be no way to truly understand that lightning makes rain occur. And it just highlights how how incredible the scriptures are, and truly they are from the divine source. When we talked about the biblical prophecies at the beginning of this series, we talked about, I put a huge number on the board, or on the slide. It was a 1-to-1 ratio, and the second one had 2,000 zeros behind it. 1-to-1 with 2,000 zeros. Just an unbelievable statistic. And that was the odds that every biblical prophecy would be true. And yet we see that every biblical prophecy has been true, that has happened in a timely manner. There are some that are yet to happen about concerning the end of time on the earth, and we have every reason to believe that those will come true exactly as the others have. But the odds that every prophecy came true was unbelievable for the scriptures, and not a single one was wrong. And when we consider this topic and the topics we're going to continue with the series, some of the other branches of science where there are other just incredible revelations made in the scriptures, it's sort of along those same lines. It's just the odds are unbelievable that every single one of these things would be revealed and that they would be true, and not a single one doesn't make sense when in the light of technology. One final consideration for the study tonight. It also has to do with lightning. Now we know that, of course, that Benjamin Franklin is credited with discovering that lightning was actually an electrical event. That seems it's a fundamental knowledge that we now have, and we sort of take that for granted. But before the 1750s, this was not common knowledge, and men did not understand that lightning was actually electricity. Well, about 180 years later, the photography was invented, and a man by the name of William Jennings began noting that lightning had these sort of branching offshoots that occurred with the lightning, and there was sort of one central line of lightning that would occur, and then there was the great big flash of lightning that would occur immediately following that. This sort of led to a few theories being made about lightning, but it took a few more years until 1935, with the invention of high-speed cameras that were able to actually capture the full sequence of a lightning strike. And we're now able to understand that lightning occurs in several different steps, and there's sort of a process that happens. The lightning, so that electrical disturbance that it begins in the cloud, it begins to create these leaders that start branching out. They're searching for the path of least resistance to find the positive charge of the earth, or negative, whichever it is, to find the opposite charge. And so it begins to make these sort of, it tells us it's about a 50 microsecond increment that lightning takes as it steps its way to create a path to the earth. And then once it hits the earth, and sometimes there's electrical charge that comes up and they meet, whenever that path is created, then there's a surge of electrical energy, and that's the burst, that's the bright light that we see and we call lightning. And we now know that lightning actually comes from the earth up to the cloud, but it follows that path that the cloud sort of creates. And we see here a couple passages in Job that make a reference to this. It says in Job 28, verse 26, when he made a law for the rain and a path for the thunderbolt. Then again in 38 and 25, who has divided a channel for the overflowing water, or a path for the thunderbolt? And that word path there, when it's broken down, that is that pairs perfectly with what we now understand through science to be the stepped leaders that occur when a lightning strike is going to be happening. And that path has to occur for the lightning to take place. It's just another incredible revelation that's made to us in the Old Testament about meteorology that the ancient writers could not understand. And again, it just drives home what I hope to bring out of this study, that the scriptures are divinely authored, and these ancient writers were writing about things, and they were everyone was spot on, and it just gives us, for me anyway, it just gives me so much faith, and it's a really fascinating topic for me to study. Hopefully it's fascinating for you as well, and Lord willing, we'll continue this. There's several other branches of science that we'll consider, and we'll draw some examples out of scriptures for those as well. That concludes the study this evening. If you are here and you desire to obey the gospel and become a Christian, we want to extend that invitation to you. It's an open invitation at any time, but for means of convenience, we offer it now and encourage you to do that. If you're here and you've done that and you've become a Christian and have strayed away or need the prayers of the church, in another manner, we offer this time as well as we stand and sing.
We really appreciate you watching this channel and supporting the Chapel Grove Church of Christ YouTube page. I want to ask you a quick question. Do you want to help in a big way spread the gospel and help this channel succeed? All you have to do is click the subscribe button, click a thumbs up, and then share it with a friend. Share it on social media, share it on text. However you do it, just share it for other people to see. It helps the channel grow, it helps the videos get out there, and it helps spread the gospel in a really easy way that has a big effect. Thank you for supporting us, and come back for more videos.